Here we are for episode 5 of Spring Forward Workshop. Welcome, and I hope you enjoyed the last episode where we featured Marla, which is such a fabulous dress. It's shift dress time. And if you know me, I love a good shift dress. I'm all about the layers, but in warmer spring months and heading into summer, it's always nice to have a dress that you can just throw on a piece of jewelry, and out the door you go. I also love the Jack and Jill pant, which we're going to feature next time, but which is almost like a little bit of in place of a petticoat kind of comfy look. The first of today's episode is the Ruby dress, and Ruby is amazing. It's a simple dress. It has an asymmetrical cut line around the neckline. The sleeves are cut wide so we can insert elastic for that look, which I think is so great. You can make this dress in linen, as we've done. I love the short sleeve. The pattern comes with a longer sleeve. We used a interfacing for the bottom edge, and it looks like here we used a light voile, because we know the elastic is going to be a little heavier. So if you're using a thicker linen, this is a mid-weight, we used a voile as the interfacing on the hemline and the neckline. The sleeve is cut in the linen for the interfacing. Interfacing comes with the sleeves, the long or the short version. It has an oval neckline. So it's cut asymmetrical, and we've added elastic on one side of the hemline. It looks like a simple dress. It has pockets, but it really is not. When this is on, it gets noticed. So let me show you the pattern. The pattern looks like this. It's one piece. And it was more manageable to do it this way. So like we've done in the past, we've shown it if you place this piece on the fold, but you're going to cut one side this way and then the other side with this higher length. So the easiest way to do that is trace out the front piece. And then I'm going to, so it's that shape. Trace it onto paper and then flip this so that you have a full pattern. It's a little too difficult to cut this on the fold and then manage the different shapes. So this is what I suggest doing. So we're going to tape that together and then we're going to place it onto our fabric. And this pattern fits 54 inch, 44 inch wide. It is pretty much 44 inches wide, so it'll fit on a 44 inch wide, and if not, we can make some adjustments where you can either slim down the sides if you want to, if that's, because it's a big dress, or you can add pieces into it, which is always fun and adds drama. So I've done that, and I have my big body. See, it's very wide dress. You can adjust the neckline, you can adjust the length of the shoulders, which are about 6 inches, and you can adjust the length. We have a line here that you could make a shorter length, which could be really cute top. So I have the stripe fabric, and it's actually very wide. So I'm going to do sort of a surprise. Place this on the diagonal, and we're ready to cut it out. Then when we cut this piece out, we flip it because we need opposing sides, and then flip the pattern and cut out the back piece. So your shoulders will match the two different heights. and then we will cut our sleeves, our sleeve facings in the same fabric. And this fabric is great as a facing for the hem and the neckline. It's a rayon, and it's got a little bit of crepe in there actually. So I just love the stripe, and I wanted to share the same dress, solid dress, in a completely different fabric. So I've cut out my one side, and you can see the diagonal, which I'm excited about. And then this elastic will ruche this in. It's going to be really fun. A little bit different. There are pockets for this piece as well. So now we flip our pattern upside down so that we get the opposing piece. I'm about to cut the other side, but first, because I'm using a stripe and because I put it on the diagonal, what I'm doing is I flip my fabric piece over and I am matching the stripes, which is very easy with this fabric because you can see the stripes through it. Very easy to do. Don't be afraid of doing this because it is very easy. You just put it on top and match the stripes. I always steered clear of stripes and checks and matching. I just, I also like it when stripes are not, that the fabric is not matching, because I think it adds a garment some flavor. And sometimes they go out of the way to make a point about breaking up the print. You just match the stripes, and you can pin. You can see that they're coordinating right nicely together. My key points here would be my shoulders and my side seams. It's also a little bit difficult to do with pockets, but because your side seams are matching, they should work out quite well. This fabric is very slippery. So when using something like this, I always make sure I use a lot of pins. And I've pinned all the stripes in place. I'm using a shorter pair of scissors, and they're very sharp to make sure I get all the lines perfect. I hope this works. I have cut my dress pieces. I have my 2 sleeve pieces. I did not match the stripes. It was just a little difficult, but I think they're going to look great. I didn't do anything kitschy like put them on another angle, or I just cut them straight. I then chose, I was thinking, I don't know if I want to make the facings in the same fabric. I want a surprise element. So I chose this. And I just had a piece of it, and I just love it. So it's such a contrast to my stripe. There's a little bit of orange and purple in there that's in the fabric. The oranges actually, and the orange and black is what makes it click. So I'm going to face my sleeves with this fabric, and I'm also going to do the facing with this fabric. You see your facing, make sure you have 2 opposing pieces. If you're cutting your fabric flat, flip the pattern so you have 2 pieces that are opposite. So our next steps here are to sew our shoulder seams, add our sleeves. I did not add pockets. I think I'm going to skip that because of time. But I'm going to put my sleeves in. I'm going to prepare my facings. So we'll do that next step. I'm just going to finish the edges, do the shoulder edges of the facing, right sides together, and then I'm going to add a little bit of a few surprise elements into the piece just to make it mine. I'm loving the way this is looking. This fabric is a little slippery, but I have done the neckline and pressed it in place. I finished the outside edge of the facing. I pressed the seam allowance upward onto the band, and then I edge stitched that down. Then I folded the facing into the garment and I pressed, this is vital, I pressed the edge and I stitched down 1/4 of an inch from the edge. This way, when the elastic's in, it's going to give you that little rise. Now I'm ready for my elastic. I left a couple of inches on either side where the pattern indicates, and I've got my little piece of elastic here. Now this neckline is cut wide so that we can put this elastic in. I use a large safety pin, and I find my opening right here, and I will place my elastic in to the facing. And I continue doing that. Okay, so I've slid that right in, and I am now going to pin that edge of that elastic inside the facing, and then I'm going to continue across the shoulder, and I'm going to come out on the other end. And in preparing this neckline, you might want to measure to make sure that you're happy with the width of the neckline so you can adjust the length of your elastic to accommodate your preferred width of your neckline. Make sure it sits on your shoulders, and you can have it as loose or as tight as you want. And that's how it looks. To me, that looks a little too wide. And that's how it sits. I'm going to pin it on the other end to secure it. Make sure that I'm happy with my neckline. That's really cute. And you can see you can just see a little bit of the contrasting fabric on the other side. So I'm pleased with that. And then we stitch our openings closed. The next stage is putting the sleeves in and then stitching the side seams and the undersleeves. And if you put pockets in, you're going to pivot around your pockets. But first we're going to top stitch that elastic down on either side. This fabric is awful. So it is definitely a polyester, which I don't like to sew with, but I love the stripe and I wanted to take a chance. And I also wanted to show this dress as something silky. So I found the fabric. It's actually coming out quite nicely in that my stripes on the diagonal, the sleeves work, and my stripes do match up. If you can see the side seam, they're pretty dead on, which is so fun. I love that. So the neckline, I had inserted my elastic, I stitched it down, and this fabric, I chose orange stitching just for fun, but I didn't like the way the stitching was looking. So out of my contrast fabric, I created a little binding. It's bias binding. I folded it and folded again and pressed it and then stitched it onto my stitch line, which is cool because it actually creates this sort of almost yoke idea, but it just added a little flavor that I liked. Made it less polyester. This I thought was silk, but it's definitely polyester as well. Okay, so the sleeves. So the sleeves are shaped like so. And I've stitched, there's two ways to do this. I chose to hem this because it was becoming crazy, and only because of the fabric. And it works. So I stitched and I left an opening here, and on this side I'm going to insert my elastic on the top edge and secure it down just like I did my neckline. The other way to do it, and this is what I like with the linen, is place your facing piece right sides together onto your imagine this as the raw edge, onto your sleeve. You're going to stitch it on, and like I did, you're going to flip it over, stitch the seam allowance upward onto the binding, and then I would stay stitch that seam allowance there, and then fold it under and stitch it down. It works beautifully with the linen, which is a little bit more woven, so it lays in place. And then our hemline, you can either hem it, which I think I'm going to do in this case, or or I had this idea where I would cut strips, same fabric, it's the stripe, but I cut along the stripe. And I'm going to add these pieces onto the bottom edge of my dress. I think it'll just finish it. It'll give it some flavor. It's easier to stitch this on that way. And then I'm actually going to stitch my elastic right onto the fabric. But I needed this so that it would finish it, but also when the elastic's in, it's going to hide that inside seam allowance. For the linen piece, we cut bias binding about so wide, and you could also cut a facing for the fabric and stitch that on. Hemming it is fine as long as you keep the depth so that you can allow for your elastic to go in along one side. So we'll finish that up and move on. We're moving on to the Marguerite dress, which is so lovely. It has its tie, which you can tie in the front. I'm doing a voiceover because we had a little issue with our sound while filming. So the piece is cut in one piece. Fold, fold again. You're going to add the ties. You don't have to do the ties. You just cut off the tie. It's a simple tank dress, great shift dress. You can tie the ties behind you, in front of you, on the side. It really is a lovely shift. We made it in a voile, a light voile. This one is from Spoonflower. It's one of my prints. And you can make this in a light linen or anything soft, because the ties will make the dress a little heavy. We're going to make the dress in a light linen. I love this smoky gray. Remember, fold your fabric and then fold it over again, and you're going to cut out the piece. There are no shoulder seams. We're going to finish the armholes and the neckline with our binding, and then you see here are the ties that we're going to add onto, so the ties are nice and long and hang in front of your body or behind your body. I also chose a contrasting binding. I made lots of it. This is linen folded in half. With our original Marguerite in the voile, you can see that we lined it in actually another voile, a solid voile. You can line it, you can do the binding in the same fabric as the dress. In this case, I chose to do a contrasting binding, and here I have bound the neckline and put it on the inside. Then I added a strip of the binding and sewed it right on top of the neckline, just a little bit short of the finished neckline. When it washes, it's going to have a nice flavor. Here are the ties, they're all done. And now all we have to do is the side seams around the tie and down to the hemline. Very simple dress. I did the binding for the armholes on the outside of the garment. I also thought, to give the dress some flavor, I'm adding another piece of binding into the seam so that it just sticks through all the way down to the hemline, so that when you tie it, it's going to give the dress a little bit more flavor. Very simple dress, lots of room for embellishment. The solid dress. The tie is really the fundamental part and the feature, but you can add embellishment to the front. You can again use the binding. You've seen the big cabbage rows that a lot of folks do. I believe Krista Larson really made that popular. And you just make it sort of create a rose using your binding all the way around. It has a raw edge so that when you launder it, it's going to fray and be really fun. You just stitch that down and keep going. And for those of you who don't like flowers, you can use the binding in other ways. You can make stripes and place them on your garment where you prefer, and even vertical stripes right down the dress. The Marguerite is a little bit wide in the neckline. If you want to narrow it, make sure you measure the neckline before you cut it out. Okay, so we did the side seams. So we sewed it along there, then across the belt, or the tie, and then all the way down to the hemline. And I inserted this just by putting the binding on the right side of the fabric to the raw edge, and then I basted that in place, and then I put the fabrics right sides together and stitched it. If you're not doing that, it's always nice to do a French seam for this piece. And the reason for the white piping, I just wanted to mirror the white contrast on the neckline. And then when we tie this, and you can tie it off to the side. The white just adds a little bit of binding that it shows. I think it's really lovely. You could tie it at the back as well, on the sides. And lastly, I wanted to share the Neve dress, which is a freebie. It's going to be free for everybody. Very simple. Cut it on the fold, then fold again. There's no shoulder seam. We've done this many times in our patterns. The neckline is very open, but we gather it in so that it's full from the neckline down to the length of the garment. We simply did it around a gathering stitch, and then I bound the neckline using 2 strips of binding. I put one folded piece of binding on the outside and one on the inside, and then raw edges, and I stitched them together, then pressed them upward and stitched. And we bound the sleeves with a little binding. I love that technique with the binding on the outside and the inside because it's a very clever and fast way to bind and finish a garment. On the bottom, we just did one binding strip and then we stitched along. And the dress calls for some gathers on one side. So the shift dress, traditionally it was a loose-fitting shift dress, short sleeves, maybe sleeveless, probably around knee length, and this is my idea of a shift dress. And it's also sort of supposed to be minimalist. You know, a plainish dress, we've added some details, something you can throw on and go. Our tie dresses, which can be tied or no tie, but it's a basic tank dress. But I think the tie makes it extraordinary. And try tying it in different ways around your body. It's very versatile. The amazing ruby dress with solid dress with its details. And then, you know, the striped version to share like what a contrast this is. We put our elastics in. It's a very different looking dress. And then our easy peasy freebie Neve, which I think is really delightful. And choose a fabric that really has a great print or some personality in the fabric. This definitely needs to be lightweight because it's cut quite wide across the neck and you want it to hang. So I hope we've got 2 new prints. So completely different. So I hope you've enjoyed episode 5, the shift dress, and I can't wait to see you next time.